Thank you for tuning in to this episode of U of L's Online But Not Alone podcast. My name is Connor McGowiak, and I'm joined today by Dr. Stacy Sainer of the University of Louisville School of Medicine. Dr. Sainer is the Assistant Dean for Continuing and Professional Education. Dr. Sainer also serves as the Program Director of U of L's online Master of Science in Health Professions Education, in addition to serving as the Director for the Health Sciences Campus Office of Professional and Educational Development. The topic of today's discussion revolves around the state of health professions education. Education continues to change at a rapid pace in the age of AI, and this includes educating the doctors, nurses, dentists, and clinicians of tomorrow. A recent article by Patrick Boyle for the Association of American Medical Colleges reported that many medical schools have changed their attitudes on how AI is used and taught in the classrooms of tomorrow's healers. According to the article, 77% of respondents in a recent survey reported that AI was covered in their curriculum. Seeing this, it becomes clear that there are several emerging questions about the way we help clinicians prepare to transform from their medical careers to the next phase of life as health professions educators. What are the short and long-term challenges facing health educators today, with AI changing at such a rapid pace? What will health professions education look like in the not-so-distant future? And how can educators today prepare for the challenges of tomorrow? To explore these questions and more, I'd like to hand things over to today's guest, Dr. Sainer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Connor. I really appreciate you having me today.
Absolutely. Please go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more, share a bit about your experience, and a little about the MS in Health Professions Education.
All right. Like you did a great introduction there of all my roles, but I have been at the School of Medicine since 2016, so going on 10 years now, believe it or not. I started working in professional development, trying to train faculty to be better educators, leaders. We do leadership development programming. I took over, I guess, is the best way to say it. I took over the HPE program, started working closely with that in 2017. We've had a certificate in HPE for a long, long time, and it really just needed some curriculum updating and revamping and change. And so through, 17 on for probably the next 3 or 4 years, we worked at creating the master's degree and finally got that all online in 22. So I'm really happy that that part is done.
I was just about to ask, had health education always been a passion of yours, or was that something you just kind of moved into over the course of your career?
Well, education has always been my passion, and I think I was able to fill a niche at the medical school because they didn't have any, I'll say real educators, but they didn't have, people with educational training and background knowing about learning science. And so I was really able to step in and help make some changes, and it's really been very rewarding.
Oh, I have quite a few friends who were in medical school, are practicing clinicians, surgeons, etc. And that was something that they've kind of communicated in passing, is this idea that you spend so much of your time learning about medicine, you spend plenty of time practicing medicine, and then towards that latter half of your career, as things start to kind of change and develop, you do want to pass on and impart all this knowledge and experience that you've accumulated over a lifetime of education and practice. So it's definitely a very interesting component of the education and the work cycle of a clinician or a medical professional.
Right. We have you're correct. Like that we do have some clinicians that like graduate, finish their residency or fellowship, and then walk right into academic medicine because they had a great mentor or someone in their residency or their fellowship. But that is few and far between. We do get people looking for new careers, and I think that is fantastic. And they are incredibly hungry for this knowledge, and it's been just a wonderful experience to work with these learners.
Well, speaking of the hunger for knowledge, I'm really excited to dive into today's conversation. I'd love to start with a bit about a recent blog that you wrote about stress-proofing learning. I'd love to learn more about what inspired you to write this piece, and then what are the most important points that you hope others take away from this article?
Well, I will say, tip to anybody out there, I follow this group called the Learning Scientists, and they had sent out a very brief article kind of summarizing some of the research around stress and how that impacts learning. And I was enthralled in this little article, and so I did a deeper dive into looking into health professions education and specifically what's going on with our learners, whether they're in nursing, dentistry, medicine, whatever, because they have very high stakes
Oh,
exams.
yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Um, and so it's one of those they either pass or they're not practicing. Uh, so we've had some experience with learners struggling to do well on these types of exams. And I really wanted to provide a way for our faculty to help learners prepare and get pushed through this very high stress situation. One of the things that I always like to point out is faculty and educators in general have this idea that if it doesn't come out of their mouth or from their PowerPoint screen, the learner is not going to know.
Hmm.
They're not going to learn that. And that is incredibly not true. They are prepping, they are doing readings, they are doing work. Um, and so instead of using class time to like shove more content down their throat, it's much better cognitively if they can practice some very low stakes retrieval process. Um, you know, it could be something as simple as, you know, doing 5 questions at the beginning of the class or 5 questions before they walk out or something of that nature where they're pulling these memories out of the back of their cobwebbed head and bring them to their working memory so that they can actually use them. Because when they are under stress, that process of retrieving actually decreases. And so that's where we get test anxiety and some of these issues because they haven't had the opportunity to retrieve as much because they're either not using learning science to actually study or the faculty in those roles are not using learning science to help them gain these new knowledge and skills. And so I think that's really one of the most important reasons that we want to build in retrieval practice into our courses. It really does help break down the stress-related retrieval loss.
Yeah, just in reading it, it hit kind of close to home for me because I just completed a master's program online at U of L, and there were many different ways in which information was tested, prove how you know and can connect the subject matter to the topic that you're
Mhm.
discussing, et cetera. And I recall very clearly and very specifically some of the exams that I had to take, which was in the winter of 25. It was I don't know if you remember, there was like a foot and a half of snow
Yes,
outside. It was
not fun.
probably the highest stress course that I had. And I remember feeling kind of conflicted because on the one hand, I felt like presentations or PowerPoints, kind of to what you said, where the objective is, hey, communicate your information in a way that relates to the project. Personally, I found that that's where I gained some of the best knowledge and I was better able to connect concepts and ideas with a topic. On the other hand, with those exams, this was a highly technical field, and I know for a fact I probably would not have performed as well or learned the subject matter as well had I not been tested on it.
Right.
So, that's just for, my version of a graduate program. That's very, very different, as you pointed out, in the case of someone who has passed this exam where you're not practicing
Right.
medicine. That's a very, very different level of stress. So, yeah, I think that was a very interesting point.
Yeah, I love trying to get this information out to faculty and learners and anyone so that they can start taking advantage of learning science in general to be able to not be so anxious when they're sitting down for these high stakes exams, which in medicine there are a lot of them.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be sure to link that blog to in the link of this episode
Great.
or in the description of this episode. Um, Great. So, jumping into other parts of today's conversation and today's discussion, I would love to talk a little bit more about health professions education specifically. Basically, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the current state of health professions education, as well as some things that you may be hearing in conversations with colleagues or alumni that are in the field.
Mm. There are so many things going on. Uh, AI at the forefront. I
Mm,
know we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but other than that, our educators that want to be, or that are clinicians that want to be educators. Um, for some reason, people think because you have a terminal degree, you know how to teach,
mm,
and that is completely not the case. Um, and our program brings in different types of clinicians from all over the U.S., um, whether it's a physician, dentist, nurse, or some other type, a sonographer or a uh, radiograph, like people that do some of those technical skills have also been in our program because they want to teach their field. And it's been a fantastic way to help these people meet each other and build some relationships
mm.
and realize, oh, they're having that same issue in dentistry as we do in medicine. Oh my gosh, nursing has that problem too. And so it really kind of brings them all together and puts them on the same page, I think.
I'm very curious what you might be hearing because I think that, y- to your point, these individuals do have a terminal degree, but I think there very much is or might be an, oh, I didn't anticipate this or I didn't think about that kind of moment when they consider how do I impart this knowledge to
Hmm.
prospective learners. What are some common things that you hear? What are some conversations you see happening?
Oh, uh, I think one of the biggest ones is when we initially teach how to write a learning objective.
Mm,
Um, there is some science behind it. There's a reason for it, and people are like, this Bloom. What is this Bloom stuff? I don't understand. And once you lay it out, they're like, oh my gosh, this is really important. Um, my supervisor, he has famously said a million times he used to just write down whatever he wanted to get through CME because when you're doing a program or a talk or anything that's getting continuing education, the accrediting body requires learning objectives.
mm,
Um, and so people that don't have training in writing learning objectives, they are all talking from them, their perspective. Like at the end of my presentation, you know, I will have given you all this knowledge,
right.
right? Instead, let's change that frame and look at it from the participant's point of view or your learner's point of view. So at the end of this presentation, I want you to be able to do blank.
Mm.
And so really getting them to think about what is the audience getting out of your presentation versus what you are actually doing in your presentation has been, I think, a really big aha for a lot of folks.
Oh, certainly. Um, Talking a bit more about the MSHPE program in particular, what are some elements of this program's curriculum that you would think would be most beneficial to someone looking to take that next step in their career besides writing a learning objective or thinking about how they communicate that information?
Yeah, I think one of our program is a 33 credit hour master's degree. And I think all our courses bring some new insight to their idea of teaching and what it means to be an educator. One of the things we do spend a good deal of time on is professional identity formation. And so, especially, physicians and nurses and dentists, they have spent a very long time
Right.
creating their professional identity as that provider. Um, but they don't really pay attention to, oh, I also have a professional identity as an educator. And it takes some reflection on their part and trying to figure out, where does education fall in my, priorities and when I'm doing work. Uh, because our clinicians, they are working while they've got trainees with them, and they're like following along and then say, you go
Mm,
do this and you go do that. I mean, that doesn't happen normally. In engineering school,
right.
you're not out with an engineer while they're building a bridge, or you're not sitting with another engineer while they're drawing plans. But that's how medical training is. And so you're working side by side. And so the educator, is really has to think about, where do I want this learner to move? Because their goal is to help them move forward no matter whatever the topic may be.
Well, and this may very much be my own misunderstanding or perhaps even a projection, but I imagine that those going into health professions education are people who are at a more advanced stage of their career. They've been practicing, they have the knowledge and experience, and now they're learning how do I share that information with others. So I think that's kind of naturally a very reflective point in anyone's life, let alone
Right.
someone who, to your point about understanding identity, has
Hmm.
gone through most of their career learning, educating, preparing, practicing, and becoming a nurse, doctor, dentist,
Never.
etc. So yeah, I can only imagine at that stage of career, at that stage of someone's career, at that stage of life, who am I becoming? What is this next chapter? That's, I think, a very important part of anyone's journey.
We've done some research, forthcoming publications around professional identity formation
Mm,
and some pre-post, before they start the HPE program versus after they finish the HPE, and how they consider themselves. Like, people have said, I used to think of myself as just a surgeon, but now I'm a surgeon who educates, and so they really start to embed those
mm.
ideas of being an educator within, how they frame themselves and how they work with others.
Well, speaking of those big existential kinds of questions, I think that's a perfect transition into the role of AI in health professions education. Generally speaking, when you consider the current HPE curriculum, what are some things you think are useful in future proofing this kind of education in the age of AI?
Well, one of the things I think most people have to realize is, our trainees, our students are using this tool. A lot of times, especially our, people that are teaching in clinical settings, they're like, "No, I could tell. I'm talking with them all day." But you ask a question and you go talk to a nurse, or you go call somebody, a colleague, they're on their phone looking up answers. And we have to get faculty to ask better questions that are more cognitively complex questions, so that they can tell, is this just surface knowledge,
Mm,
or have they actually gotten the deep understanding of what it is that they need to do? Because there's a tool called Open Evidence, and it's very easy to say, I have a patient with this, their blood pressure of this, what's the problem? And it'll spit out a differential for you. Um, Instead of the student or the trainee actually thinking through what
mhm.
the differential should be. And so I think it's really incumbent on faculty to realize the students are using these tools, and that you need to teach in a little bit different way to figure out if they are gaining the knowledge and skills that they need to have to be a successful in, private practice or without any supervision.
That was something that occurred to me over the course of my own program, just because it is a tool, right? I think there's kind of an attitude of, look, yes, people can use it to kind of take the quick and easy path, but at the end of the day, how different is that really from using a tool like Google to find and retrieve information? So, something that became very apparent very quickly to me, because there's different modalities. Sometimes you're on a Teams meeting with someone,
Hmm.
or other times you're doing a recorded presentation. And there was a very big difference in my mind between those who could talk the talk and those who could walk the walk. And I think the cool part was that, sure, people may use ChatGPT, kind of to your point, on like a surface level. But there is a deeper understanding that they realize eventually they need to pursue, and I think part of that is due to the way that educators and faculty are designing courses now, knowing that that's a consideration, knowing, to your point, that that increased cognitive load needs to be evident and present to ensure that people are learning the material. But I also think it can be a tool. I used it the other day on a walk. I was thinking about something I learned in an accounting class.
Right.
And I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure this is the concept. If I remember right, this is what it's supposed to do. Am I right? Am I wrong? If so, please correct me. So it's just like anything else. You can use it to learn and improve yourself, or you can use it kind
It's-
of as a crutch, for lack of a
yeah,
term,
really, it is some,
for lack of a medical term.
yeah, exactly. They really, we've had students that you can tell it's just nothing. It's
Yeah.
nothing. We call them a nothing burger,
Yeah.
where there's no meat in there.
Mhm.
And then you have we do a lot of one-on-one online virtual exams now. So oral exams where we question them and then
Mm.
try to get them to express what they've learned or what new processes and things that they've started to do. You can tell very quickly the ones who have actually done the work versus the ones that have used generative AI
Sure.
as a cheat sheet, so to speak.
Right.
And one of the things I would like to bring up is a colleague in my office, Dr. Russ Farmer. He's done
Mm.
a lot of work in the impact of AI on our cognitive abilities.
Mm.
In fact, he gives a phenomenal Grand Rounds presentation. He's doing it again tomorrow. Um, and it's on how generative AI is impacting our brains. And one of the things that we have discovered is there's this the more you use AI, the more you develop what they call cognitive laziness,
Mm.
where you just like accept the first answer that pops up and you're like, that's good enough, I'll move on. They're not using critical thinking, clinical reasoning. Those skills start to slide down. And the more you use it, the worse you get.
There was I don't want to speak incorrectly, but I believe it was the Harvard Business Review citing a study completed by MIT that stated those who are heavy users of generative AI experience a 10 to 20% decrease
Hmm.
in cognitive capability. Excuse me.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. And it is so hard once you've used that to go back,
Yeah.
right? And that frame shifting is difficult. And my colleague Russ, he has actually stopped using a computer, like for several hours a day. He
Hmm.
actually brings a notebook everywhere. He is handwriting things, after all the research he's done. So,
I think it's that peek behind the curtain. At a certain point, it gets a little frightening. I'm not sure if you've seen, but just from my own experience and anecdotally, I see plenty of people doing exactly that, using a notebook where possible. I don't know if you've seen old iPods are
mhm,
blowing up right now,
I
like
love it.
incredibly on the rise. But I do think there's a degree of adaptability that might be involved in that. I think more and more, to your point, I think there's a percentage of people who are seeing the answer that AI gives and accepting that as truth. Conversely, I think it's also possible that we recognize the dangers, we recognize the concerns of generative AI as it impacts learning, as it impacts cognitive function. And I think there's a growing subset of the population who is thinking a little bit more about that, who might be moving away from it. And the other side of that, too, I think in a world where everyone is using AI, how do you differentiate yourself as a clinician, as a learner, as a student, as a employee? I think having that cognitive ability is going to be a differentiator in the world ahead.
I have zero doubt. And one of the other things that I would point to is the folks that keep using generative AI tools, you know, the research shows that, I mean, just like any other skill, clinical reasoning is a skill.
Hmm.
Critical thinking is a skill, and it is something you can practice and learn and get better with. And so when they stop doing it, then they are losing those skills.
Right.
It's a use it or lose it sort of thing. And it's important to get faculty to have better training around education so they know the tools and techniques that they can do to actually pinpoint, is the learner taking shortcuts, or do they really know, or do they just have a gap in their knowledge? And that's what we need to work on right now.
You just touched on this a few moments ago, but looking back to the article, how much can or will AI shape education in an industry where so much revolves around actually being able to practice, actually be able to function um, in a clinical setting?
You would be surprised. There's a lot of AI tools that are already out in the clinics and hospitals and things. Like I mentioned open evidence, but
Yeah.
there's also software that you walk into the room and then it automatically will, you have to get permission, but start, you know, formalizing and typing down the conversation between you and the provider. And then, which is phenomenal for the provider because they spend hours typing notes. And if we can alleviate some of that, they can have more face to face time with their patients. And so that is a great thing. But they also need to know how to use it. And that is also something that has to be learned.
Something that I came across recently was the idea of compassion in healthcare, and how critically important it is, not just for the sake of being an empathetic human being, but
Mm.
also from a patient's perspective. I read about the relationship that it feels like if it feels like my provider cares about me, I'm more likely to follow through with prescribed medicine or prescribed treatments, or
Yes.
following through on appointments when issued or prescribed. And thinking about that in an age of AI, I could see where many might be concerned. Okay, I go to the hospital for this, they punch it into AI, and I receive treatment X, whatever it might be. But the way you're describing it, it almost sounds like because some of these tools are available, and if used properly, that might actually provide more opportunity for clinicians to empathetically respond to patients or engage with their patients on a deeper level. Do you think that's possible, or do you think
No,
that's
that is wholeheartedly the goal with some of these tools that they've put into the electronic medical records. Because for years, I mean, my colleagues will say, yeah, I was doing patient notes for 5 hours last night, and people are like, oh, you're a doctor. It's great. Well, no, they're working 12 hours
yeah?
shifts and then going home and doing notes for 5 hours. It's not a fun thing.
No, I don't imagine so. Um, Well, still, a very interesting idea, and I'm excited to see where and how that might change in the future. And speaking of the future, and speaking of your own experiences with health professions education, I know that you are no stranger to podcasts yourself. You have your own podcast called Faculty Feed, which recently covered topics like trauma informed teaching, palliative care, and nursing leadership. How do topics like these help shape your approach to health professions education?
Well, our goal with Faculty Feed is really to get new ideas and interests out there. So the palliative care was one, you know, what does that really mean? People think they know what it means, but in reality, it's completely different. Um, and we use these uh, podcasts in our courses. We actually have them as, not readings, but listening,
Right.
things to do and take advantage of so that they can learn some of these new pieces from other experts from all over. And so I really think Faculty Feed has done a great job really laying out a common foundation that can really help folks see the gamut of what there is with learning and all the things, it's just like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yep.
And it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. In fact, I just sent that picture of the graph from Dunning-Kruger out to my class yesterday, and just trying to reinforce is like the more you know, then the more you realize you don't know,
Yep.
and so it's really important. But AI in general, we are currently in the final phases of approving. Getting accredited a graduate certificate online in um, health professions education. And the goal of that certificate is to help faculty understand how to use the AI tools in their world. Um, Faculty don't know how to do curriculum maps. Faculty don't know how to check for knowledge gaps. Faculty, this is not something that they were trained to do. And I just taught a workshop at noon today about how you can use different AI tools for curriculum mapping, whether it is, you want to figure out where's the gaps in the curriculum or where are the redundancies that we can take stuff out.
Mm.
Um, and the people that were on that presentation today were so excited. I mean, they're like, "Oh my gosh, actually, I never thought we could do this. And then now I have this tool that does it really quickly. And so we want people to know about the tool. We want people to use it appropriately, but we also want to use the tool with your learners in a you know best practice sort of way.
Do you have I guess, two follow-up questions there. Do you have a proposed timeline on when you think that new certificate offering will be available? And then two, I mean, just thinking out loud, that sounds like it'd be a pretty incredible topic for the Faculty Feed podcast. Is that an upcoming episode?
Oh, absolutely. We've had a couple of AI episodes, but once we get this finalized, I think it'll be great. It's at the last stage before it will go to the Faculty Senate for approval.
Mhm.
And since it is a certificate, it doesn't go on to other accrediting bodies. But we are planning on we'll have a leadership certificate, we have a graduate certificate in HPE, and the AI certificate, and you can bundle those to get to the master's degree. So we're really excited about having these other opportunities for folks.
Yeah, we're excited to see where that goes. You said a word a moment ago that I really enjoyed, that being the gamut of topics available within the broader space of healthcare. Again, recently I learned about social determinants of health
Really?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, just as one thing that, so many different variables can play a role in how someone lives, their
Right.
overall health and well-being. And I think that within healthcare, there's very much different determinants across a very wide body of the conditions, the
Yes.
topics that healthcare can treat and address. And something, again, to your point, you don't know what you don't know, or the more that you learn, the more you learn how much you don't know. And just thinking about podcasting, especially in a template like as an educational tool, I think it's a tremendous asset in giving people an opportunity to be exposed to different topics or different ideas or new ways of thinking. And especially in a field as complex as healthcare, I think that's incredibly needed and incredibly necessary because it can be so easy to become siloed in your own little circle, your own little
Correct.
space.
I see we have departments and, divisions within department. We have departments with over 200 or 300 faculty that might have 20 divisions, and even divisions don't even talk.
Hmm.
And so, let alone being in pediatrics and going to the Department of Internal Medicine or any other department. So, we really have found that bringing these voices have really highlighted some things for others and helped them realize um, what they don't know.
Well, thinking a little bit more as we move into kind of the tail end of this conversation, I'm curious what you think the future roles of health professions educators might look like, whether that's in the age of AI, after the age of AI, et cetera. And then specifically, how does U of L's health professions education programs prepare students or prepare learners for what that future might look like?
Right. Um, I really see the goal is to be able to utilize AI tools in an ethical uh, way.
Mm,
We have to make sure that people understand you cannot put PHI or health information, patient health information out in an AI
oh,
platform
yeah.
if it's not, enclosed. We really want people to take advantage of these tools. I really see our courses have changed dramatically over the last 2 years since the advent. I mean, I know it's more than 2 years now, but it's taken a while. Um, that's why we now do oral exams.
Mhm.
That's why, I don't ask for written papers anymore. There's no purpose. And so I think helping people see that they need to change their expectations is probably the biggest aspect of this new learning environment. So they can't just ask a what level question to a trainee, what is that, over there? That's not going to tell you whether or not they have gained new knowledge and skills. You have to ask more cognitively complex questions. You have to give them thinking time. The average time a medicine faculty waits between asking a question and answering it themselves, and this has been studied, is 1.2 seconds.
Okay.
And if we could get faculty to let the learners have some thinking time, because what do they learn from that? They learn, if I stay quiet, you're going to answer your question and I
Right.
don't have to think about it. And so it's really about changing the way they have practiced education
Hmm.
for a very, very long time.
I think that actually raises a very interesting point too. Especially again in medicine, but there's other fields and other industries as well, where having that human connection is not only needed, but it's also how you establish credibility. I think in particular, how many times have you been on you've been on a phone call with customer service,
Hmm.
and it's like, "Hi, I'm an automated service. Go
Yeah.
ahead and ask your question. Talk to a representative. Talk to a
Yeah.
representative." But especially in something like, medicine, where people's lives are very much on the line, or in more advanced fields such as the law or in finance or other industries, at a certain point, it's like, look, having these tools are good and well and fine. And as a consumer or as a patient or as a client, yeah, I can use those tools to kind of get a base understanding. But to the point that you raised earlier, when you start to think critically, it's like, okay, am I convinced that that's the correct answer? I want to trust someone in a position of authority who can speak from a place of knowledge and experience to give me that reassurance to proceed forward with a treatment or move forward with a project or so on.
I really think you've hit the nail on the head right there, because um, if you don't have the experience, you've got to find someone to trust, and without, you know, creating psychological safety and that within your clinical environment, learners will just go to their generative AI tools and not come to you. And so that is also incredibly key to help learners move from their lower cognitive thinking skills up to, being able to apply and analyze and evaluate.
Thinking about prospective students who might be interested in this program, or even just more broadly, clinicians who recognize, hey, I'm coming to a later stage in my career. What's next for me? Do I finish through here? Do I want to educate the future? Someone asking those kinds of reflective questions that you mentioned at the beginning. What's something you'd want to communicate to those prospective students or those people asking those questions about your program?
I would really like to get across the fact that teaching is different now than what you experienced as a student or trainee. A lot has changed. The learners themselves that we're working with, this generation, has changed. And if you want to be able to interact and engage with your learners, whether they're students or trainees, you really have to understand some of the basic learning science and what they're coming. I mean, these people have had a computer or something their entire life. I remember using a landline, I remember before there was email. And so they don't know anything like that. And so they're used to instant gratification. And
Mm.
sometimes waiting is very painful for them. So when you ask a question, oh my gosh, take 5 seconds. And, you can see them squirming. It's fine, because that's the hard work of learning. And so, one thing I always tell folks is learning is hard. If it's not hard, you didn't learn.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully, that's one of the things that I can impart on professionals who want to be educators. Um, it's a great opportunity to learn about learning.
That's something just in conversations I've had with, prospective students or people considering moving on to getting a graduate degree or completing a bachelor's degree or whatever the case may be. This idea, well, I'm interested in it. I think it might be beneficial. I don't know if it will ultimately pay off. And something that I find myself saying time and again, that's also reflected from faculty and staff and everyone else. Yes, this education will not be easy, but the most worthwhile things in life very rarely are.
Right.
And more, again, perhaps this is just naivety on my part, but I have to believe that people recognize that the world is changing very, very quickly, and also recognizing that that instant gratification that you brought up might not necessarily be the best thing.
Right.
So,
It is.
well, we've certainly covered a lot in this conversation. Is there anything we didn't cover that you'd like to share?
No, we're just excited to get our new programs online. I've hired 2 new faculty in health professions education. We're growing. I've got people from all over the U.S. And one of the things, especially licensed providers have, is their continuing education dollars that they get from their institutions where they work. I have students all the time. Their institution is paying for them to go through the program.
Absolutely. That's information that we can also include in the materials that we'll make for this. But having said that, I think we'll go ahead and start to wrap things up. Thank you so much again for your time, and thank you to the listeners for joining us for this conversation. The University of Louisville offers over 70 online programs, which include bachelor's, master's, doctoral, and certificate programs designed to allow you to complete your degree on your schedule. There are transfer credit and scholarship opportunities available for many of our online programs so that you can save time and money on your education. If you'd like to learn more about the online Master's in Health Professions Education or the Graduate Certificate in Health Professions Education, you can click the links in the description of this episode, or you can learn more at ufl.me/obnapod. Again, that's ufl.me/obnapod. Links to Dr. Sayner's blog post and the Faculty Feed podcast will also be available in the description of this episode. Thank you again for tuning in to the Online But Not Alone podcast. When completing one of U of L's online programs, you may be learning online, but you'll never be alone. And thank you again so much to Dr. Sayner for joining us. I hope you all have a great day. See you on the next one.